This is a pothos, and in today's video, I want to share with you two super easy proven ways that I propagate this beautiful vining houseplant. You may have tried it before and not been successful, or maybe you're a newbie and you want to give it a try, which is great. In this video, we'll start by covering water propagation, then go straight into soil propagation, all of it close up and in detail with results, so when you're done watching this video, you can do it yourself. Also, if you stay until the end, I'll show you how to step up your water propagated cutting to soil so it doesn't die. And you'll also be able to use this tip with other plants when you transplant them from water to soil. Okay, so to get started, I'll grab my plant, and in this case, it's this beautiful variegated pothos that's in a big need of a haircut. It's getting a little longer than I like, so I want to trim it back so that it can continue to fill out. And regardless of the method that I use when I propagate, I always start by making sure the plant that I'm looking to take cuttings from is free from pest and disease. If the mother plant does have any issues, I resolve those issues before propagating, so I don't end up having to take care of two plants, the mother plant and the new cuttings, with similar problems. So at least a day or two before I even make my first cut, I like to water my plant thoroughly and just make sure it's properly hydrated and can go through the process of propagation. And when I water, I usually use a combination of bottom watering and top watering by filling a bowl with a little bit of water, placing my plant in the water, adding water over the top of the soil, and then letting it soak for about 5 minutes. Watering it this way lets me get a better soaking than top watering alone, and I don't have to let it sit as long as I would if I were just bottom watering. Okay, so it's the next day. I'll start by disinfecting the pruners, which I always do, to prevent the spread of disease from one plant to another. And then I look at the mother plant and strategize where I'll take my cuts so that the mother plant still looks nice when I'm done trimming it. I'm pruning just below the top of the pot and leaving enough plant to continue to produce breaks and make my plant bushy. And when we're done, we have a bunch of cuttings. Now, there are two ways I prepare these cuttings for propagation. And the first one is a one node cutting. With this method, we look at a cutting and we have the stem, the petiole, the leaf, and the node. And with the one node method, I'll make a cut here, and I'm left with this as a cutting. A small piece of stem with the petiole and one leaf. Which, if you use this method, make a bunch of them in case some don't root and so you can create a fuller plant. Now, the second method is to create a multiple node cutting, which looks like this, and can have as many nodes as you like, but I stick with two, and I'll tell you why in a minute. To make this two node cutting, I'll grab my runner and make a cut here at the bottom of the stem. So the cut is near the node. 1, 2 nodes, make a cut above the top node and leaf, and remove the bottom leaf right away. Don't make the mistake and cut all your cuttings and then remove the leaves, because by the time you're done, you might not know which side is up and down on your cutting. So remove the leaf right away. Between the two methods, I personally like the two node method because when they do root, most of the time they'll root in two areas of the stem, which gives me more anchor points into the soil, which helps the cutting sit firmer in the soil. Instead of like this one that was a one node cutting and it sits wobbly in the pot. Also, this two node method allows me to initially have a fuller plant when the cuttings eventually end up in the soil. The only time I personally use the one node cutting method is if I only have 1 or 2 runners, and then I use it because it allows me to make more cuttings with less plant. So just think about that. Now that we have our cuttings prepared, we're finally ready to propagate these in water. So I start by filling a bottle or jar with room temperature water. I use tap water and it's always worked for me. If you have tap water with high mineral content, especially chlorine, then you might choose to use distilled, RO, or even rainwater. I then take the cuttings and place them in the jar and make sure at least one node from each cutting is submerged. This is another benefit of the two node method, and that is that it increases the chances my cuttings will be sitting in water because the cutting is longer. If I run out of water with the one node cutting, then the cutting may be sitting out of water for a while, and that may be what prevents my cutting from rooting. Once they're in the water, I put them under my grow lights, or you can put them next to a well-lit window where they don't receive direct light. I make water changes every couple days to keep the water fresh, and when life gets in the way, as it usually does, don't worry about a little algae, just clean the jar, and if you like, you can rinse the roots under room temperature water, but be careful not to burn or chill the roots. I then put them back in the jar until it's time to transplant them to soil, which I'll show you in a second, and I'll show you the rooted cuttings. But before that, let's go over how I propagate pothos straight to soil, which provides a couple advantages over water propagation. The first being that I don't have to transplant them from water to soil, and so I save time. And second, there's less chance of losing the cutting during the transplant. So let me show you how I do it. I start by preparing the cutting the same way I did for water propagation, by taking a cutting, in this case a neon pothos, sizing my 2-node cuttings, and removing the bottom leaf. Now I'll prepare the soil by using a mix of 70% core and 30% perlite, and fill a small pot with the soil. I'm using a 4-inch pot because I don't want the soil to hold too much water, which could lead to root rot. And when I'm done, I'll slightly compact the soil so the cuttings don't fall over. Then I grab some rooting hormone and pour a little on a napkin so I don't dip the cuttings in the bottle and possibly spread disease to future cuttings. I then take one cutting and stick the bottom end into the rooting hormone. Then with a wooden dowel, poke a small hole in the soil and place the cutting in the soil and slightly compact the soil around the cutting to keep it in place. I'll then do this for each cutting, and when I'm planting them, I'm making sure that I leave room for the other cuttings and that they're evenly spread apart. Once all the cuttings are planted, just like I did when I propagated them in water, I water them thoroughly, place them under my grow lights, and do one more thing, and that's to cover them with a glass dome. You can use plastic if you like, but basically, we're just trying to create an environment like a greenhouse around the cuttings that maintains a higher level of humidity, which will keep the cuttings from drying out, and once the cuttings root, I'll remove it. So here we are 3 months later. They all rooted and have put on a fair amount of growth, and my next step is to prune them so that this little plant can continue to fill in. Okay, so now I promised you I'd show you the results of propagating the pothos cuttings in water and how to transplant them to soil, and here they are. This is about 2 weeks growth. They've actually grown quite a bit. I haven't added any fertilizer yet, and if I wanted to, this would be a good time to start. But in this case I won't yet, because I want to show you how I transplant them to soil. I start by taking the same mix I used to propagate the pothos in soil, a mix of 70% core to 30% perlite. I'll get a 4-inch pot. Remember, it's better to go with a smaller pot than a bigger one. You want it to be big enough so the roots fit comfortably inside. Then I add a little soil to the bottom of the pot and grab my cuttings and slowly add more soil around the rooted cuttings, making sure they're evenly spread apart from each other and always being careful not to damage the roots because they're really sensitive at this point. Once the pot's filled, I tap the side of the pot to get the soil to settle and add more soil if I need to, and then slightly compact the soil. Now I'll get my watering can and water the plant thoroughly. At this point, I really want to soak the soil. You want to keep in mind that these cuttings were propagated in water, so that's what they're accustomed to, and we're trying to move them to a drier soil mix. The trick is to keep the soil very moist for the first 2 weeks or so, and then over the following 2 to 3 weeks, slowly reduce the moisture of the soil by watering less frequently, until you have them to the point when you're only watering when the top 2 inches of soil are dry. Now, after you've propagated your cuttings, you're still going to want to know how to care for this beautiful new houseplant you've created. And the key information you need to make sure you don't kill your plant is in this video right here. So make sure you watch it to grow that beautiful plant you want.